All right, Fran, you're all set.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the October 12th, 2023 Connecticut Paid Leave Board of Directors meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It is 9:01. Amber, would you kindly take attendance?
Sure, thank you, Fran. Ava Bermudez Zimmerman.
Present.
Isha Canada.
I just let Isha in. So
I just like that.
Okay, great. I'll circle back. Adrian Cochran. I don't believe Adrian has joined us yet. Andrea Comer.
Present.
Sheila Hummel.
Present.
Ellen McKitterick.
Present.
Fran Pastore.
Present.
Alice Pritchard. Alice. I know you're here.
Sorry, I didn't say it loud enough.
Give you
Present.
the chance. Great, thank you. John Scott.
Here.
Mike Stoltis.
Here.
Molly Weston Williamson.
Here.
Holly Williams. I don't think Holly's joined us yet. Janae Wood Weber.
Present.
And Justin will not be joining us today. I just want to loop back Isha Canada
Present.
and Adrian Cochran. Has Adrian
Present.
joined us yet? Wonderful.
Yes.
Good morning. Thank you, Adrian.
Morning.
We have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. And I'd like to thank the members of the public who are joining us. Thank you so much for attending and being with us today. I would like to first make a motion or ask for a motion to approve the September 14th meeting minutes, which were distributed last week.
So move, John Scott.
Thank you, John. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Could I abstain? Madam Chair, Alice Pritchard, I was not in attendance.
Thank you. Okay, it looks like the motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Okay, I'm asking Erin to please lead us in a discussion regarding the contribution rate.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. In the right. There we go.
We can see your screen, Erin.
Okay. Whoops. So this is an expanded slide deck from what we used to lead our discussion in September. We tried to provide additional information based on the feedback we received last month. Just as a quick reminder, our statutory responsibilities, technically the board's statutory responsibilities for the authority. We are responsible for providing benefits to workers. We're responsible for collecting contributions to make sure that the trust fund balance is sufficient to pay our income replacement benefits and to limit the need for changes to either the contribution rate or the benefit reduction. So the statute does ask us to take into consideration, we have some consistency. And of course, we are responsible for making sure that people know about our program so that they can use it. Really, the issue that we're talking about today is, should we keep the contribution rate at the 0.5%, or do we want to reduce it to the 0.475? And the concern is that at 0.475, if our actuarial estimates are 100% on target, we still have a nice profit loss or expenses do not exceed our income. But if there are variations in our incident rates that are not accounted for in the actuarial estimates, then we do have some concern, because if the incident rates increases by just 0.25%, you are looking at expenses exceeding income in the next coming years. And of course, incident rates going up faster puts that into jeopardy sooner. So that's the real concern that we have. Our actuarial estimates are simply estimates, and they're based on a year's worth of claims data and information, historical information from other states. Just as a reminder, we've not been paying benefits for very long. We're just under 2 years. We've already provided over $500 million and benefits to over 80,000 Connecticut workers, which is great, but it's still a relatively low take-up rate. As we've talked about in the past, when you look at our raw numbers, the actual claims incidence is hidden a bit by the fact that we made a change earlier this year to make it easier for applicants who are filing for both pregnancy and bonding. So previously, we had required them to file 2 claims, which is what a lot of states do, but that's not really great customer service. And so we changed it so that if the applicant tells us at the time that they file their claim that they anticipate going straight into bonding from the pregnancy recovery, we treat it as one claim. If we were still treating them as 2 claims, so prioritizing our data over claimant needs, we would actually be able to see that our claim volume has been increasing. It's increased over 12% since March. We're also seeing a higher approval rate. Right now, the 3-month rolling average is just under 72% for approvals. But if you accounted for the fact that bonding claims typically would have been approved, if the pregnancy claim was approved, we'd be actually closer to a 75% approval rate, which of course results in more claims being paid. Again, it's been almost 500, by the time we wrote this slide, it was almost 500 million. Now it's over 500 million. And the majority is still skews toward the last calendar year. So we are seeing growth on the claim side as well and on the payment side. The chart is a little bit lumpy just because some months have 5 weeks, but you do see a trend increasing, showing that we're paying more now than we paid a year ago. And when you look at year over year, and we fully expect that trend to increase. We did look at other states just to get some more up-to-date information. And we are seeing that take-up rates in other states are increasing quite a bit. Rhode Island, New Jersey, and New York all have more mature programs than we do. And they continue to see a good increase year over year. Just to be clear, when I was talking about our take-up rate, I was talking about percentage of covered workers. So that's why it's a low number. This is just looking straight at claims or payments increasing. And so we see that Rhode Island is reporting that they're just seeing a 30% increase since 2020, since before. So they attribute that to just a greater awareness, particularly post-pandemic, of the benefits, which is interesting because their program is over 40 years old. So that's a big jump. New Jersey hasn't published their 2022 data yet, but they did see an increase of 23% from 20 to 21. And New York reported a 26% increase in the number of claims between 2018 and 2022. They changed their benefit rates, so I haven't included that number because that's a little bit misleading. Washington and Massachusetts are our peers in terms of being new programs, and so they see more volatility. Washington has seen a huge increase and they expect their payments to double. So 2023, they think will be twice as total benefit payments as they saw in 2020. Massachusetts just reported that they have seen a over 27% increase in applications and their benefit payments increased by 37%. And they're a year ahead of us. So again, estimates are great. Historical data is somewhat helpful, but it doesn't really take into consideration the volatility that we're seeing across the other states. I also wanted to share the contribution rates in other states, and I thank Amber for putting this chart together. So a couple of things to point out here. First, Connecticut is the lowest rate. Washington started a bit lower than us, but they have gone up. And so we are currently the lowest rate at 0.5%. The other thing I think is important to point out is that other states do not have a cap. As Molly had mentioned last month, other states have the ability to to kind of go up and down. And you see them doing that. Whereas in Connecticut, we can't go above the 0.5%. So, you know, some of the states that are going down from a high of 3.2% or 2.45%, things that we wouldn't be able to do. I also want to note, because it's not referenced here on the slide, first, Massachusetts just announced last week that their 2024 rate will be 0.88. So they started at 0.75, were able to go down for a couple of years, but now they're going up to 0.88. The other thing that I think is interesting is that California has had minimal changes over the years, but they just announced that they're eliminating the contribution cap. So as you remember, our contribution is capped at the Social Security contribution limit. California had a similar cap, but they are eliminating that cap. So even though their rate isn't changing, employees in California will be paying more because they're not capped. So as we talked about, because we're capped, we could not make up a shortfall by increasing the rate over 0.5%. So we have less flexibility than some of the other states. And we are also constrained by statute to making changes only one time per year. We have to make the decision no later than November 1st for the January 1st. We cannot make any sort of mid-year changes. If we wanted to make any sort of adjustments, we'd have to wait the full year. And I think it's also just important to point out that we get no money from the state. So we don't get any money from employers. We don't get any money from the state, which means that we don't really have a safety net. Just by way of comparison, Washington has recently gone through a process where they changed their calculation rates for their contributions. And as part of that process, Washington State appropriated $200 million to their program to help ensure its solvency and smooth out the rates over the next few years. I just don't see that happening in Connecticut. The fact that we were going to be self-sufficient was a significant factor in getting the program passed to begin with. You've seen this slide before. I just want to remind you, if we were to reduce the contribution rate by 0.25%, we're really not changing sort of the bottom line for Connecticut workers. Our minimum wage workers would save about $7 a year, which really is pennies a week. The folks at the Social Security contribution cap would save about $40 a year. So the impact on the individual citizen is somewhat muted compared to what I see as a risk to our program with claims volatility. We wanted just to do a quick reminder, we don't keep the fund. The fund doesn't come out of the economy. The fund is actually invested in the STIF account, the short-term investment fund, which in turn is invested, which is how we're able to earn the interest that we earn on that. So it's not like the money is coming out of the economy. It's just being used in a different way. I promise you, I don't have any gold bricks in my backyard. We were asked to talk to employers and other stakeholders. Mike, I think this was your request to not just look at the impact on the employees, but to look at everybody. And in our communications with different stakeholders, as well as other states, when we talked about what they experienced when they changed contribution rates, it is a significant communication issue. You do need to get the information out. Programs like Rhode Island, which again has a 40-year history, said people are kind of used to it by now. But when you're talking about newer programs, the communication impact is greater. One entity told us that there are some significant downstream impacts, one of which is just needing to deal with the fact that when you make changes, you open up the possibility for more errors. So there's, when states reduce the rates, now you've got overpayments that you have to process. When they increase the rates, you've got underpayments that you have to process. And many people said that 60 days is just not enough time. highlighting the fact that the fourth quarter is already really busy for payroll processors. I want to point out that insurance companies, the private plan market did tell us that they really felt it was necessary to have time to make sure they're communicating with their private plan employers to determine if there's going to be a need to re-quote coverage. Under the statute, private plans cannot charge employees more than we charge. So if the contribution rate is reduced, there has to be a decision made about whether they're going to re-quote it or if the employers are going to pay the difference and how that's all going to work. If the obligation on the employee changes, that could involve a new vote. This is particularly difficult right now because we have such a large number of private plans terminating in December because they're at their 3-year mark. And so there's a lot of private plans actively engaged in the renewal process right now. Approximately 45% of our plans require employees to pay something more than 0.475 in contributions, either 0.48, 0.49, or 5.5. And we're hearing anecdotally that some of those renewing plans that may have subsidized the plans originally are no longer doing so. So we may see that number increasing in the future. So with all of that, as you know, my recommendation is to maintain the 0.5% contribution for 2024, which gives us time to continue to monitor both the claims and the contribution data. We are still working with less than 2 years worth of history. And we know from our analysis on the reinsurance option, most insurance companies for similar scope issues, or it's not similar scope because most were a pretty large program, but just in general, they're looking for 3 to 5 years of claims history. We would like at least 2. We are continuing to work with Spring Group to assess what objective standards we could put in place to make it easier for the board to make a determination when rate changes are appropriate, to really think about not just what are the minimal levels to support the solvency of the trust, but really to help identify what constitutes a true surplus. And then, as we've said before, we're happy to continue this conversation and make sure that it is a frequent topic of discussion for the boards. My thought would be that we would try and move most of this discussion to the summertime instead of the fall in the future, just so that we're not running up against those timing difficulties that I've alluded to. And of course, if the board wants us to, we can continue to explore a reinsurance option, which is something that has its own set of costs. So we would really want board involvement in that. So I'm going to sharing my screen and allow you to ask me any questions if you want to, or to discuss this recommendation amongst yourselves.
Erin, thank you so much. That was quite thorough and informative, and appreciate that. And I am in agreement with you and the team. Anyone else?
There's 2 of us with our hand up, myself and Molly.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Molly, go ahead.
John had his hand up first, so I want to let him
Oh,
go.
sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Erin, I appreciate the work that you've put into this slide deck, and I do have some questions and some comments and some thoughts, because really this is at my doing that we're having this conversation today. In the legislation, it very clearly states that on or before November 1st, the authority may announce a change in the contribution rate effective January 1st. So essentially, they've given us a 60-day window every year. And then if we vote on something today and we approve it, we're really giving them closer to 75 days to make a change. Why do you think that the legislature did that? And why are we doing something different than or why are you asking for something different than what the legislature put in place?
So in terms of the deadline for making the announcement, I think there was a recognition that you need to provide some level of notice. I would be shocked if anybody who was involved in the drafting of the legislation really got down into the weeds enough to analyze whether November 1st was the right date, or if it just seemed like a good date because it's kind of 2 months before. That sounds good. So I don't know how much market research went into picking that date. I think we certainly don't ever want to go past November 1st. But I think we have the ability to go before November 1st. And I think that based on what we're hearing from employers and insurers and payroll providers, they would prefer it. We have heard, for example, from Rhode Island that issues their decisions usually in November, and they've been doing it for 40 years that way. But even though everybody knows that that's when it is, they all start calling in September and October just to see if they're going to do it sooner. So, I think it's just the latest date, but not necessarily the earliest date.
Okay. The other thing on that first page, it kind of jumped off the page at me. I'm wondering if we have any legislative intent on how this should be defined, but you talk about limit the need for contribution rate increases or benefit reductions due to changing economic conditions. How are we defining economic conditions? Is there, again, any legislative intent on that? Is it our economic condition? Is it the state's economic, the country's economic condition? How are we to figure that?
Right. So I think I am not aware of any legislative intent on that issue. Again, I was paying pretty close attention to the debate when it happened, and I was involved in some of the drafting, but I was obviously not in all of the rooms all of the time. I think there was a recognition that this is funded by employees, so that you're talking about employee, obviously high levels of unemployment would impact the program. High levels of employment and high levels of salary levels could also impact the program. So I think there was sort of a recognition that there needed to be some flexibility, and they were putting the authority for that flexibility in the hands of the board with that 0.5% cap. I think the fact that they talked about limiting changes to me indicates that there's a value in limiting volatility, that employers and employees like consistency. I don't know if anyone else who was in the room has other memories of what was going on at the time.
Okay. So on the next page, you have the slide or the graph that you generated. So if I'm to read this correctly, the blue line is if everything seems to follow what Spring Actuarial Services has already put on the table is what their projections are?
Sure, I'm just going to share my screen so everyone can see which line we're talking about. And I know Harindra's here, so if I say something wrong, Harindra.
Well, actually, there's more than one blue line. It's hard when I printed it off and then see the actual thing on the screen. So the top blue line, what does that represent?
Blue line. Oops. I'm just really trying to get it to get bigger. My computer's not letting me. Okay, so the top blue line is as you said, I just don't know why I won't do that. I'm going to give up. The top line
we can see it, so we go.
The top blue line is basically using the the incident rate that Spring used in terms of the same assumptions. So, the actuary report that they provided to us this summer included assumptions about the program's health going forward, which had baked into it assumptions about the percentage of covered Connecticut employees who would be taking benefits going into the future. And they included growth in that, going from about 3.75% to over 6% in the coming years. And so that blue line is kind of that number that they used for their actuarial report. And then we said, okay, thank you. Now tell us what would happen if we reduce the contribution rate. And so they did that, and that's where we got the 0.475. And what would happen if our incident rates increased? So I think I shared last month kind of the comparison if we stayed at 0.5% versus 0.475. But the red, sort of the orange, the bright orange line shows if our incident rate increased by 0.25%, which is about 4,000 additional claims per year. The gray line is if it increased by 0.5%, which is about 8,000 claims per year, and so forth.
Okay. Can I be allowed to share my screen? Because I've got the spring report up on my computer.
Yeah. Amber, are you able to do that?
Dawn, you're all set to share.
Thank you. Let me pull it up. Are you able to see my screen?
No,
You
we
can
are.
see your screen.
Okay. So this is the chart that just jumped off the page at me that's giving me agita. And that last number of $761.7 million, $750 million that would be sitting in our savings account. And if you look at this chart, which I'm not sure how it ties into the chart we were just talking about, the spring is talking about increases in our incurred claims from $300 million this year to $400 million in 2026. Increases in contributions from $433 million to $488 million based on payroll between now and 2026. So I guess I need to back into how that other graph works. Why are we doing something different? I mean, this actuarial firm has been paid a lot of money to make projections for us. They're usually right. I mean, I've never seen an actuarial report, wrong or off maybe more than a point or two. And it feels like even if we were to decide today to drop it to 0.475, that the 2026 number would drop, but I don't think would drop enough to be actuarially significant that we would be in financial trouble in the coming year. And maybe the spring guys can explain that if they're on the line today.
Right. So I'll start, and then Harindra can jump in. So I think it's important to recognize a couple of things. First, so this is sort of the summary page of if we kept it at 0.5% and we kept the increase in take-up rate based on the assumptions that were in the report. And so, as I said, I think, with the expectation that it would grow from about 3.75 up to about 6%. And if that is correct, then yes, there is a projection that the ending fund balance would be at the 761.7. But these are assumptions, and they do vary. So, for example, our contributions this past year were lower than anticipated in last year's actuarial report. It's by about, I don't remember the number. Someone can tell me what that number is. But they were lower. Not in the grand scheme of things, it's not enough to cast doubt on the value and use of the actuarial assumptions, but it is kind of a salutary reminder that these are assumptions, and you're really sort of drawing with a crayon and not with a fine point pen. And so
the insurance company president heard you say that you'd be fired as an actuarial, because they like to see it.
But I don't think so. I think the reality is that our margins are very small
Right.
and we have very few resources to adjust. So if our claims increased by 0.5%, then that is significant in terms of our long-term health, particularly growing beyond just the next 3 years, but into the next 10 years, which was the request. So after the actuary report came out and we provided the next 3 years, we had a few requests. One was, let's look out 10 years. The second was, what would happen if incident rates changed? And what would happen if incidence rates changed and our contributions changed? So now you're including a few new variables. My feeling is that when you have these variables, when you have a program where a percent does make a pretty significant difference, it behooves us to be conservative. So I'm not casting doubt on the work or the value of Spring Group. I'm just acknowledging its limitations with a new program in a market that is pretty new in general. Harinder, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yes, sure, thanks. I'll just mention a couple things. So one, these results and the other graph, they're based on the same information. There are different, there's one difference in, I guess, that blue line that you're looking at versus this information is that blue line is based on 0.475% contribution, whereas this is based on the current 0.5% contribution. So there's a difference there. But other than that, it's the same. And obviously the other one is a much longer term projection. The other comment I'll make is just in terms of the rate change, or really the underlying assumptions. Firstly, it is this view for the annual report is specifically, I'll call it based on one set of assumptions. And the reality is actual will be higher or lower than that. We have a little bit of conservatism built into these assumptions, but we're also relying on historical data. We are assuming kind of closer to an expected state than an extreme worst case state, right? So I know some of the scenarios that we were looking at in the graphic were, okay, if incidence rate does go up a lot more, then what, right? So, when you're looking at things like rate changes and so on, you might be more inclined to say, okay, and especially the kind of long-term balance of the fund, you're probably more inclined to think about it in terms of, okay, we want to make sure this is a sustainable program over the long term. And also with the perspective that if you are making a change to the rates, potentially while you can adjust year over year, ideally the rate change is more of a longer term change and not necessarily a short-term change that really plan to bump it back up or down the following year. So a few comments there that covered up a few things. I'm not sure if that helped, but I'm also happy to help support any other questions.
Thanks, Harinder.
Thank you. I'm sorry to monopolize the time here, but I guess this is my fault that we're here. So I just want to get some questions answered.
Not a fault.
So when you look at this chart here, you got your contributions earned from 433 to 488 million. I'm assuming that you factored in things like our minimum wage increases pushing $16 an hour coming soon. If it's not already there, I saw something in the news about that. Does it also factor in things like Electric Boat here in Groton and New London is hiring by the megaton for people to build the submarines that we're building for the United States and Australia? Those have got to be relatively well-paid people. So that's going to have a trickle-down impact on other businesses and things like that I have to project would at least meet your targets for contributions or perhaps exceed them. Was that at all factored in?
Not specifically those companies that you just mentioned. Those were not factored in. We had assumed some general changes in employment levels and some general salary increases across the whole population, but not specifically single company level hiring.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Just to add to that though, that also means that you have the potential for more claims. So,
Yeah,
it
well, does
affects
Electric
both
Boat have
sides.
their own plan?
No, they're part of our program.
Are they? Okay. So before I move away from it, and I'll get off the screen so you can share your other screen. Going back to your graphic there, Aaron, that using that blue line, the top blue line, again, coming off of the fact that in fiscal year 26, we'll have $761 million based on what we're doing now. It looks like I'm reading the graphic. We'll be pretty close to that number. Just under, maybe, so for 26, kind of hard to draw a line. But it would appear to me that we're still pretty close to $700 million 3 years out. What would be the impact on this graphic if we decided today to do the 0.475 and then next year we realize, damn it, we're wrong. We got to go back to 0.5. So we have a little hiccup in there. If everything stays the same, how would that impact things?
Go ahead, Rohinda.
Oh, I think it's not a huge impact financially, because it's the 0.025% change is not like that big of a change in the biggest scheme of things. I think it was a $20 million impact roughly on the graphic per year. Let me just make sure, but
I will, so there are a couple of things though, John. I think we have to think about long-term solvency and not short-term up and down, because we do hear people are wanting consistency and they don't want changes year over year. Secondly, if we were to have, you could combine a reduction in contribution with an increase in claims, you amplify the impact of that reduction. So instead of it being, 20 million or 25 million lower in contributions, you're now sort of digging a hole that's going to be harder to come back from, because we can't ever recoup those, because we can't go up to 0.525. So those are the things that I think are really concerning for us in particular compared to other states where you saw them making up the difference.
Okay.
I know that Molly's been waiting patiently,
Yes.
and I know there are other folks. Do you have any other?
I do have a series of questions, and I apologize for monopolizing, but I do have some more questions on this text sheet. If you want to have Molly take over and I'll come back to my questions, that's fine with me.
Molly, go ahead. Thanks, John.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. I think just the first thing that I think is worth talking about in this discussion is we want take-up rates to go up. We want take-up rates to go up a lot. So the best big data set we have of how many people actually need leave is there's a big national FMLA survey, which suggests that something like 15% of all workers take leave for a qualifying reason each year. There's probably more who need it but don't take it. So when we're talking about, we're estimating we get up to 6%. We're never going to get to everyone. That's not realistic. But if we get to 6% take up, that means there's a lot of Connecticut workers who have paid for these benefits, who are entitled to these benefits, who are not getting them, which is why we're doing all of this outreach work, and we're doing all of this process streamlining work, and we're doing all of this work to bring the denial rates down. So I think just when we're thinking about what it means for take-up rate to go up, that means we're getting closer to meeting the needs of all the Connecticut workers who are supposed to be getting there, knowing that we're never actually going to get there. So I think when we think about what causes that fluctuation, so what I can't keep track of the colors, but in the graph that has all the different colored lines, when we're getting to the lower and lower lines, that means we're doing our jobs well, because we're getting take-up rates to go up because more Connecticut workers are getting the benefits they need. So I think like when we think about what assumptions are built into getting to 6% take-up, 6% take-up means we still got a whole lot of work to do. And so I think when we're thinking about all of these numbers, I just want to make sure we're keeping that in mind, including things like what we saw from Massachusetts, what we saw from Washington, that lots of programs are seeing, and again, they're not to the numbers they want to be at either, but they are seeing big jumps, and big jumps should be our goal because that's what we need to get to where we're supposed to be. So when we think about, is 0.5 enough, is 0.475 enough, like enough for what should be our first question. And I think enough to meet the needs of Connecticut workers has to assume a much higher take-up rate. The second thing I want to say is just fundamentally, like the state of Connecticut made a promise to workers to say, when you need them, these benefits are going to be there, and they're going to be here at these specific rates. They're going to be here at this wage replacement rate and this number of weeks. And we're charged with fulfilling that promise. And I am really concerned that if we lower rates at this juncture, one day or another, and maybe it's next year, maybe it's in a couple of years, we won't be able to keep that promise. And I think that, when we think about what's the impact on workers, particularly low-income workers, if the program is running out of money, the only tools we've got as a board are we can raise and lower the rate up to 0.5 once a year, and we can cut benefits. And if we get back into cutting benefits, what that's going to mean for the bottom lines of Connecticut working families, particularly low-income families, is going to be catastrophic. And I think when we're thinking about the dollars and cents here, I think thinking about what a benefit cut would mean to families' bottom lines is a big part of that. I also think thinking about what that means for trust, because we're never getting it back. If we break that promise once, we will never get that trust back ever. And I think that just is a rough place to be. And I think it's worth, and I know I've said this before, but the legislature has a lot of tools to adjust to things that are going on. The legislature can make employers contribute, as they do in most programs. The legislature could raise the cap. The 0.5 cap is by far the lowest in the country. Lots of states have no caps. In states that do have caps, it's almost always at least a full % or more. 0.5 is way low. The state could say, oh, if it turns out 0.5 is enough, we could have more generous benefits because there are ways in which these benefits are less generous than we want them to be. The legislature could, like California, get rid of the contribution cap to make the benefits, the contribution rate more progressive. Legislature could do all kinds of things. We can't do any of those things. And so I think insofar as we're having a question about what's the right balance to strike between what we are asking workers to contribute and what we are giving back to workers, we have very, very limited tools. And I think if we think that balance is not the right one, then we should be seriously considering whether we want to ask the legislature either to give us more tools or to place more responsibility with someone else to make those actions. And I think just really thinking about what that means in terms of our trust, that we have this really important responsibility, but really a very limited tool set to do it, just does put us in a rough place. And I want to name one more time, and then I promise I'll stop talking. We have a one-time nest egg to run this program forever. We got 1 year where workers were paying in, but we weren't paying out. And the intent of that was to build up reserves to cushion the program forever. Almost like an endowment almost. Like the intent was, that's our baseline to keep us safe through economic fluctuations, through as we're getting take-up rate up, all the things forever. And if we lower the rate prematurely and spend that down, it's gone and we're never ever getting it back. And I agree with Erin. I don't think it's realistic that if we got into a situation like Washington State did, where they made their rates too low and they got into solvency problems, that puts us in a very, very tough position. And I think the idea that we can rely upon the state coming in with additional caps is not realistic. It's also not fair. It means that we have not done what we were supposed to do. And so I think really thinking about how are we stewarding that reserve, and I think we can fine grain how much that amount should be, but I think if we think about it less as what are we saving year over year and more as how are we stewarding our forever nest egg, that might help us better conceptualize how what our responsibility is to that money. So that was a lot of rambling, and I'll just say I don't think we should lower the rate at this time, but I've talked a lot, so I'm going to let other folks in.
No, Molly, thank you. Thank you. You kind of encapsulated a lot of the thoughts that I personally had. I think my biggest concern is the trust factor and the availability of the funds to low-income families, because I'm seeing in my own shop how that's how this program is impacting, and in my own life right now. So thanks for those details. Before we go back to you, John, can we just go to Mike and
Yeah,
just
go
see what
ahead.
he has
Yeah,
to say, and then we'll
I'll
go back?
Yep.
All right, Michael, go ahead.
All right. Good
I
morning.
also am trying to be very mindful of the time, everyone. It's 9:45. So I want to get through everyone's, I want to hear from everyone, but I want also to be mindful of the time. Mike, go ahead.
All right. Good morning and thanks. I think it's a terrific discussion, a discussion we need to have. For me, I mean, I don't want to take any money from employees that we don't need, right? I don't want to have excessive contributions sitting there. But as we sit here today, I'm not in favor of reducing the rate for a few reasons. One is the brief period of time that we have claims history. I mean, if we were sitting here at a longer period, 4 years, 5 years, whatever, then I think it would be very prudent to review where we are and reduce. The second is the national trends. I mean, that slide that Aaron put up, every state with a program was seeing significantly increased claims or benefit costs. And I just can't even articulate why we would be not included in that at some point, whether this year or next. And third, and maybe this is the most important reason to me, I heard Aaron say we're working on an objective criteria. In my perfect world, we would come up with a formula, and we'll leave it to Harindra to figure out what the formula is, but we would not have to every year have this, what do you think? Should we go up or should we go down? Kind of on a subjective basis. But we would have a formula based on the number of claims, the benefits paid out, the cushion we believe we need, X%, and it's almost automatic. That, I think, would have a lot of integrity. It would give us all comfort. And so that is really the main reason I'd like to see that by next year. Hopefully we could do that by next year. My last point is, I'm not opposed to giving employers greater than 60 days notice of the need for change. I mean, having represented employers for a lot of years, they start looking at their benefits for the following year almost as soon as the first of the year, maybe somewhere in July, and have a benefits window come, October. And not that they can't adjust from November, but I'm not at all opposed to giving them more notice than the statute requires. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. John, let me go back to you for a minute, and then is any besides Molly and John? Okay.
All right, I'll go first, and then Molly's got her hand up, I see.
Okay.
Molly
Okay,
actually
let's
brought
just
up
keep-
part of the conversation that I wanted to ask, and there's a slide that Aaron presented to us about take-up rates. The data for much of the stuff, so Washington, Rhode Island, and New Jersey appears to be 2 to 3 years old. Do we have any newer data from those states that would be comparable to the take-up rates that we're experiencing here in Connecticut?
So I provided the best data we could find and the most recent data we could find. The Washington data is from our conversations with them, and so their reports about their increase and what they expect for 2023 is as current as our meeting with them a week ago. New Jersey is the oldest data because they haven't updated their reports. New York provided a more recent report, but it kind of looks back at their program.
Right.
And so yeah, it's complicated by the fact that different states have different programs and have made changes. So for example, New York and New Jersey have changed their benefit rates. Washington's changed its contribution rates in their formula. And so we're just trying to gather the best information we can and share that with you. But it is definitely true that the existing programs are seeing high numbers. I will tell you, Colorado, which just opened up, and they've now been paying benefits for 6 whole weeks.
Hmm.
Is it Colorado or Oregon? I mean, Oregon. Sorry.
Oregon.
Thank you, Molly. Oregon, which has just opened up and has been paying benefits since September 3rd, is actually seeing a lower take-up rate than they expected. It is 6 weeks old, and they have a high percentage of private plans. So they are an outlier, but to me, having 6 weeks is statistically
yeah.
not significant. I
Right.
want full disclosure, they are having lower rates than expected. Everyone else is high.
So when you compare these states, I'm assuming there's pretty significant differences in benefits that are being offered by those states, and perhaps are even covering COVID, where we're not.
Washington did cover COVID, but that they've excluded that. That's sort of a slightly different. It makes their data a little bit tricky, but their information has excluded that. They cover basically the same reasons. Not everybody does safe leave, but or domestic violence leave, but our numbers for that are really low. It's kind of not impactful. We have lower benefit rates. Our cap is lower. Our $900 per week cap is lower than the others, which is why I really tried to focus on claim volume and not focus as much on the money. And Molly, I know you've got these statistics even better than I do, so feel free to jump in.
Molly, did you want to respond?
Sure. Yeah, I think just as we're thinking about sort of like who's comparable, when we talk about existing paid leave programs, we've got 4 programs that have been running for 70 years, which means that we don't really know what happened right away. And they sort of staggered in because they started with just medical and then they added family leave. So New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, California, there's lots of ways in which they're not super comparable. There's ways in which they are. Washington State and Massachusetts, DC are sort of our best comparators. Their benefits are not identical, but they're fairly similar. Lots of the key dynamics are fairly similar. It's similar numbers of weeks. Benefit levels, Connecticut's on the low end, but like roughly similar. But I think particularly in terms of like program age and how quickly will take up rates increase, our best data is going to come from, in the following order, Washington State, DC, Massachusetts, because that's the order that they came online. They're all still really new. The oldest of those programs started January 1st, 2020. So like, there's just a lot of unknown here. Like, we don't have a program we can look at that says, starting from scratch with all the purposes, here's what it looks like at 5 years, here's what it looks like at 10 years. Like, that does not exist. So I think we're all kind of figuring out what to do with that. And I think that does put us all in the world of thinking about things like the FMLA survey data to help us figure out, okay, we have a very rough sense of how many people need this. We know we're not close to meeting that. What's a realistic goal to get to? But I think what we've seen is we should be going up and we should probably be going up fast. And I think all of the data we have suggests that continuing to go up is likely. And if we do our jobs, going up even faster. Especially with, I will say, to brag on Jessica, like Connecticut has nation-leading outreach work. And like part of what that is supposed to do is make our take-up rates go up. So I think we're going to continue to see that. I'll hop out of the queue. I just wanted to ask a process question because I've had a lot of questions about time. If a private plan raises employee contributions, do employees have to vote again?
Yeah, it changes the bargain that the employer and employee made. So, yeah, if the employer covers the difference so that employees are left alone, there's no need to a new vote. But if it changes the deal, they're going to have to vote.
Got it. Because that may be something that's worth noting from a timing perspective, and that will take some non-zero amount of time to do that voting if they do have to do that.
Thank you, Molly. So this leads me to my next question, which is on your contribution rate changes in other states. And, you know, we're at 0.5. I think we've had the benefit of having a year to collect money and create the trust fund that Molly referred to. And that is a great trust fund that I think really won't be badly impacted by dropping it a quarter of a point. But I'm looking at these other numbers where there, you know, looks like there was a 3%, now it dropped to 2%. I mean, they're kind of all over the place. These look like as a pay-as-you-go type of a situation, that they don't have trust funds. Would that be an accurate statement?
I don't think that that's an accurate statement, because everybody other than sort of existing states, well, setting aside the ones that exist for 70 years, because I don't really know where they started, what kind of money they had and when they began. But the new states, Washington, Massachusetts, DC, us, Oregon, and the ones that are coming on board now, with the exception of Minnesota, they all anticipate that 1 year or more of contribution collection. I think Oregon brought theirs down to 8 months, but anyway, they had a certain amount of contribution collection to assist them in kind of getting set up and ready to go. Minnesota is the only one that didn't have that, and they're basically pre-funding a full year through appropriations because they have money. I'm happy for them. So I think we're all in that same boat of having a certain amount of built-in reserves, whether you call it a trust fund or not. I think is a factor of that, just statutory language, but everyone starts with a certain amount of reserves that is supposed to help smooth and maintain the solvency of the fund, and then the contributions go up or down. But we do see that these other states do have the ability to charge a whole lot more, and most of them are charging employers, and most of them have the ability to make up the difference if they need to, which is sort of what you saw with Washington going up so significantly, with Massachusetts going down, but now going back up, in some of the other states.
You talked about additional risks specific to Connecticut, and there's one risk that just came to mind when I was reading that deck: the implementer. That is always full of rats. Having served in the legislature, it's surprising the stuff that can come in there. And I guess a worry that I have is if we're sitting on, again, $761 million in 2026, and the governor's office or the majority party needs $100 million to balance something, can they, in the implementer, magically sweep $100 million out of our account? And are we on the radar by having that kind of money sitting in a savings account for us?
Okay, so you gotta say it's not a savings
It's
account.
not savings, right?
It's our trust fund. It's an
investment account.
Investment account, but it's a lot of money that we don't necessarily spend right away, and so that's why I've got concerns that this money is going to be sitting there on the radar for somebody to be greedy with.
I mean, I get that. I do. And with all due respect to the legislators and former legislators and future legislators, sometimes you just have to recognize that they can, they have creative ideas. However, it is our responsibility to ensure the solvency of the trust. This is a promise that the governor, the legislature have made to the citizens. And I think the best way that we can prevent anybody from being creative with the trust fund is to have this robust discussion and talk about the risks, and therefore say you can't do this. If you want this program to exist, you need to wait, which is also why I personally think it's premature to make any changes to the benefit rates. We just need more data. We need more time to see kind of where our trends lie compared to other states. And so I think we can, by our actions at the authority, prevent anyone from thinking this is something that they can just grab. And I think we've got enough people in the administration, in the legislature, who will recognize the value of the program and don't want to impose a mortal wound on a really good program that's helping, over 80,000 employees and counting. for some sort of short-term gain.
Agreed.
I would hope that they would never do it. I'm just saying, we've seen historically that they've done things like that to other state agencies that are sitting on a pile of money. So I just would say that that's a risk that we face by having that kind of money sitting in whatever the name of the account we want to call it is. So I'll go ahead. The next thing I just wanted to point out is that, when you talk about the impact on workers' wallets, if you go to Access Health Connecticut, they base the cost of health insurance on income. So I should have done it on the $160,000 level, but I did it at 140. A two-person household making $140,000 in income would be eligible for almost $1,200 a month in premium tax credit. So, we're not talking about a ton of money. Like the $160,000 income household would get $40 back. I guess I think about this from the lower income, people making the minimum wage. Yeah, $750 doesn't feel like a lot of money to maybe the group of us in this room, but that could be a can of beans for a meal or something like that for families. So I think that we need to think about the fact that whatever we can give back to the taxpayers. I mean, we certainly, as Molly said, we have a promise. We want to keep that promise. I'm not looking to undo that promise by having this conversation today, but I also think we have to be cognizant, because the next slide says we're not taking it out of the economy. Well, it's tax, and anytime we're taxing somebody, it is being taken out of the economy. It's a half a point. We've taken in, we'll have taken in $761 million, probably more than that, actually. I'm not doing the math right, but we're sitting on a lot of money that's come out of the economy. And I'll just wrap up real quick. I know I'm burning time here, and I want to be cognizant, but again, I'll stipulate that we have 60 days to make these changes. I think that's very doable. Everything is computerized these days. One question I did have, what is our notification requirements, or what are the notification requirements that are built into the law? Can people do it by email if we made this change, or does it have to be a letter sent in the mail? How are the notifications required from employer to employee in this stuff?
So those are not defined. And so it's really a matter of making sure that it's more of the practical element of making sure it happens and making sure it's done correctly, as opposed to there being a statutory or regulatory limit.
Okay. And I guess one last question. I think we do have a representative from the Department of Labor here that's part of our group. It's been a while since I've had to do my own payroll and things like that after I sold my business, but the Department of Labor changes the contribution rates for unemployment benefits once or twice a year or something like that. How much time do they give employers in the state of Connecticut, and how would that be different than if we gave our employers the 60 days if we voted today for January 1st?
It's a great question, John, that I don't know the answer to. So I can certainly get that answer to figure out, how much time they generally give. But I don't know the answer to it off the top of my head.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Molly, did you want to? Thank you, John.
I think that's all I've got for now. Yep.
I think Ava was ahead of me in the queue.
Oh, sorry. I don't see you. There you go.
My hand being brown on a brown backdrop is hard to see. So yeah,
Thank you.
Probably go back to yellow. So I do want to point out how impressive the due diligence of my fellow board member John is. The best thing about being in a board is having robust conversations and making sure that people are prepared. So definitely want to just say, shout out to John for your passion. In regards to my question, I was curious as to when is the next window if we were to have this conversation again next year or subsequent years. When would the next window be, and how realistic is having a window to have this kind of conversation possible? And before someone answers that, I do want to say on the record that I do support keeping the surplus. I think it's fiscally responsible considering how new the program is still, and we're doing so great. Making sure that there's enough money and we're using taxpayers' money in a way to grow the program and service more Connecticut residents, I think is a phenomenal thing. But I am curious as to, in the future, what does this look like, and how can we tackle this conversation again?
Right, so the only official rule is that we have to do it by November 1st. Our goal would be to
Excuse me.
be able to get more data. There's some constraints relating to year-end information with our fiscal year ending on June 30th. So I think it would be good to move this discussion. We can have periodic updates during the year, but sort of move the discussion and the debate to the summertime as opposed to the fall, so that we can make that decision early. For example, I don't actually know when Department of Labor is required to report on minimum wage, but they start telling us in the summer what it was going to be, even though the official report didn't come out until the fall. And I think that's sort of the goal that I would have, would be to be able to beat the deadline.
By the way, Aaron, October 15th is the deadline for the minimum wage announcement, but this year they told us September 18th was the official announcement. So it was about a month earlier. And then obviously, as you mentioned, conversations prior to that. And the COLA index they use comes out, I think, in July.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. Thanks, Ava. Molly? Oh,
This will be my last one, I promise.
okay.
I think just in thinking about, I think it is always right and good to be focused on low income workers and really thinking about how this works. I think the other thing we should be thinking about here is that when we talk about the difference between a 3-ish% take up rate, we're hoping to get to 6. And if we got to everybody, we'd be looking at, which we're not ever going to do, no one ever does. It would be more like 15%. The folks who are in that gap, the folks who have a need that are not getting the leave that they have paid for and earned, are way, way, way disproportionately likely to be low income workers. And that's not a Connecticut problem, that's an everywhere problem. So I think when we think about how do we meet the financial needs of low income families in Connecticut, I think our best tool is to make sure all of them know about these benefits they're paying for and can use them, because that's the way that we're going to make the biggest difference at the most important juncture. So I think just it's low income workers coming and going, and I think we should be thinking about them in both directions.
Thanks, Molly. And I thank you so much, Ava, for pointing out the robust conversation, but also really, John, I kind of want to joke and say, tell us how you really feel. It's just, I'm just so impressed with the kind of effort that you put into having this conversation. And really, I wasn't here for the last 2 meetings, but really putting this on the table and forcing a conversation, which is really what we're supposed to do. We're conducting our fiduciary responsibility. I will say that, in the end, we have to trust the system, trust the process, and trust the leadership of the organization that we have put in charge of managing the authority. Before I move to a vote, I want to make sure that I want to give everybody else a chance to chat, to say whatever they feel needs to be said. And John, I wanted to give you one last opportunity because I think you had something else that you wanted to share. Does anybody else want to jump in on this conversation and voice an opinion before we, it's 10:09, before we move to a vote? We have a longer agenda. We have several more items on the agenda. Okay, let me give John the opportunity to make some final remarks.
Thank you, Fran. And guys, everybody, I appreciate you putting up with me today. I know this has been a long discussion. I come from a fiscal conservative background, and I'm always trying to be cognizant of what the decisions that we make as a group will have as an impact to the taxpayers. And when you look at the fact that we have some of the highest income taxes in the nation, the highest sales taxes in the nation, add to it, another 0.5 point for paid family leave, it gets expensive to live here in the state of Connecticut. And if there's any opportunity for any aspect of our government in the state of Connecticut to lower something, even if it's a nominal 0.25 point, I think we should really have that discussion because it's really darn expensive to live here. So what I heard today, and this, just like one little sentence really kind of has jumped off the page, is when Harindra was going up through the questions that were being asked. And he said that quarter point change is really not that big of a change, which would imply to me that it probably would have minimal impact. So I guess I'll just wrap up, under Robert's rules, what I'm going to say by making a motion that we lower our contribution number from 0.5 to 0.475.
Thank you, John. Do I have a second?
Ouch.
Okay. So the motion fails. Is that correct? The motion fails.
If there's no second, then there's no.
There's no second, there's no, okay, and so then, I guess it's my job now to ask for a motion to keep the 2024 contribution rate at 0.5%.
Just point of order, do we need a motion to keep it?
I think we need to make an announcement. So the cleanest way to do it is to have the board vote.
I'll motion to keep the rate at 0.5%.
Thank you, Molly. And do I have a second?
Second.
This is Isha.
Isha, thank you.
Can we have a roll call vote?
Yes, we are going to do a roll call vote. Amber, will you kindly do a roll call of the board members?
Yes, thank you. Okay. So for a vote to maintain the existing contribution amount, Ava Bermuda Zimmerman, yay or nay?
Where'd she go?
Did we lose Ava?
I'm here. Yay.
Okay. Thank you. Isha Canada,
Yay.
Adrian Cochran,
Yay.
Alice Pritchard,
Yay.
Sheila Hummel. Sheila, are you with us?
I think we lost her. I don't see her on the
Thank you.
roster.
Ellen McKitterick,
Yay.
Fran Pastore,
Yay.
John Scott,
No.
Mike Soltis,
Yay.
Molly Weston Williamson,
Yay.
Holly Williams.
Yay.
Thank you.
Point of order, my name wasn't called. I vote yay.
Sorry, Andrea, just as a reminder, Andrea and Janae are both technically non-voting members. So when we do roll call votes, that's why. We
Thank
love
you.
you, but I'm just trying to.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the yays have it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the motion carries. The contribution rate for 2024 will stay at 0.5%. Again, I want to thank everybody and John, again, just mentioning that, you did such a great job of trying to lead us down that road. And we look forward to having this discussion.
I'll be back,
again.
trust me.
We know, we have no doubt. We have no doubt. I did want to say one thing about Mike's recommendation. I would like to have a further discussion about what Mike recommended, not today at this meeting, but I'd like to put it on the agenda going forward because I think getting ahead of this is important, and having a process that we can all trust and respect, I think is really important. So Mike, thank you so much for that recommendation. Okay, we're going to move on to point number 5 in the agenda. Locke, would you kindly lead us in the discussion on the resolution for entering into a contract for the processing of returned mail? Thank you, everyone.
We can see your screen lock.
Locke, are you on mute?
All right, can you hear me okay?
No.
Sorry about that. All right, sorry about that. Morning, everybody. So today we want to ask everybody, ask the board to vote and authorize the authority to enter into a contract for scanning services as a solution to our return mail, which is a byproduct of our monthly non-compliance letters. For our monthly non-compliance communications, we keep it simple. For anybody that registers with us, providing us an email address, we email them. And then for anybody that are registered through us through TPAs that have not provided an email address, we do bulk mailers from our third-party printing service vendor. Our goal here is to figure out which employer addresses were outdated, resulting in their mail coming back to us undeliverable to our PO box, What we want to do is stop mailing to these addresses because we know they're going to come back. We want to accumulate these lists of undeliverable mail and send them to TPAs, so that way they can take further steps to provide new addresses and appropriately close their accounts. We've explored cataloging the return mail in-house or even enlisting extra temporary services, maybe 3 to 5 days a month. But we determined that the most effective route was to go with a proven solution that is currently used by the state-approved vendor ScanOptics of Manchester. They're currently being used by Access Health, where forms are being sent out all across the state, and they also experience a large number of undeliverable mail. The process starts with the vendor going to an agency-specific PO box daily to retrieve and begin scanning all the mail. They will continue. They will provide imaging services and index values we need from each of the letters, telling us which ones we need to turn off future mailings. The service will process all of our generic mail as well. So what that means is if a handwritten letter is mailed to this PO box, the vendor will scan the letter, send it back to the team for further processing. This will provide a sustainable solution for all physical mail. Today, we're seeking a resolution because scanning services was not a fiscal year 24 budgeted line item. We estimate this fiscal year's cost to be about $9,000. This includes a one-time implementation fee. We plan on building a process with the professionals to set it and forget it. This is a request not for more funds to the budget, but rather to reallocate funds that are already part of the contingency line that we already have approved for the fiscal year 24 budget. The process of identifying bad addresses to turn off mail destined to be returned to us will allow us to take the next big step to clean up our data, reduce the number of undeliverable mail going out. That means this number will continue to decrease as time goes by. We're going to get better data and clean up as we go. This concludes my short presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns before you vote.
Any questions for Locke? Okay, Locke, thank you so much. I'm going to call for a motion to authorize the authority to enter into this contract of processing returned mail. May I have a motion?
So moved. This is John Scott.
Thank you, John.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
We have a question on the floor.
Oh, Aisha, sorry.
Yes, apologies all. I was just going to make a comment about Locke's presentation. I appreciate that and really like the fact that you've used a tried and true example with Access Health, having me work at social services. So we also use it for many of our programs and services. And it is a way for us to make sure that we can capture our clients who are potentially, eligible for services and being able to reach a wider audience. So I just wanted to say thank you for bringing this forward and supporting the information that you provided to the board. So thanks.
Thank you, Aisha.
Thanks, Aisha. I'm not sure where we left off there. Did we have a second?
Andreas.
We did. Okay. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, this motion carries, and we will now move on to item number 6. Michael, would you kindly provide the update on the finance accounting manual revisions?
Absolutely. Thank you, Fran. And good morning, everybody. I'm going to go a little bit fast because I know we've got a lot of topics still to go through. If I go too fast, please stop me. If you have any questions or comments, please stop me. So the next 2 items are about revisions to 2 policies that we had posted for public comment. The board had voted about 2 months ago to post them. The window for public comments closed on September 22nd. For the finance and accounting policies, these are revisions mostly just to make sure we were in line with practices. So signatory authority, using the right job titles, describing the systems we use for expense payments, and various other changes. There were no comments from the public during that notice and comment period. So the request will be for the board to vote to adopt the policies as revised with no additional changes. before we take the vote, happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Michael? Okay, I don't see any hands this time, so I'm gonna move to ask for a motion to adopt the revisions to the private plan policy. Thank you, Mike.
I'm sorry, the finance and accounting policies.
Oh, I'm sorry. Finance and accounting, yes, I'm ahead of myself. Finance and accounting manual.
So
This
moved.
is Alice Pritchard. Oh, sorry, I'll second Michael's motion. This is Alice Pritchard. Sorry, I'm having technical issues. Can't seem to stay on camera.
Thank you, Alice. Thanks, everyone. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Michael, now it's the private plan policy revisions.
Thank you so much, Fran. So similar timeline, we had revisions to the private plan policies. I'm going to share my screen because we did receive comments related to these, so I do want to share for a brief moment. Just as a reminder, the intent of the revisions were it was a general refresh based on lessons learned over approving private plans and overseeing private plans for the past 3 years. So removing out-of-date sections, clarifying the requirements, and organizing the document to make it more user-friendly. Hopefully that'll make sure that employers are more aware of their responsibilities under the program, as well as any other interested parties. We had a couple of semi-new requirements that were really meant to strengthen existing rules and ensure that compliance. So for example, denial of private plan applications due to lack of compliance in the past, either because they didn't administer their private plan correctly previously, or they weren't making contributions in the past, things of that nature. Not so much a new rule, just sort of a new consequence of existing rules. Similarly, a requirement that employer contacts be up to date, so we have someone we can reach out to for notices or audit requirements or other responsibilities for the private plan. And then finally, penalties for continued submission of contributions for approved plans. Once they're approved and they're covered under the private plan, they should stop paying us and potentially now pay their carriers or other third-party administrators. If they pay us, we have to refund it. So now there are penalties associated with the third time that they make those unexpected contributions. So that was the intent of the original changes. We did receive some comments. I'm going to go through really quickly. If anyone wants to listen to the Policy and Personnel Committee meeting, we did have a longer conversation about the changes, but I just want to respect everyone's time and go through it rather quickly. One of the requirements was about a requirement that employers provide employees with the official private plan policy document within 60 days of the effective date. What that ends up being is a requirement on TPAs and insurers to get that contract created for the employers to be able to provide to the employees. So it does add a little bit of a burden on them. And we did receive a comment about that it was a quick turnaround time, that it was potentially unnecessary, that they already received a sample version of it during the vote. And we did take that to heart. We didn't want to totally eliminate the requirement or extend it out too far, but we did agree to extend it to 90 days. So now the employer has 90 days from the effective date to get their employees the policy document that we use to administer claims. We also clarify the requirement that they don't have to actually send the policy to every single employee, as long as it's available to the employees. Post it on their website, on their HR portal, something of that nature. And then also adding the requirement that they must provide that document to us as proof of the coverage within 30 days of that 90-day mark. And then the other additional clarification was if they provided the actual policy earlier, then they've met the requirement and they should continue to make it available to employees. But if they provide a sample or draft version that may not be the exact policy, we would continue to require that they provide it within the 90 days. Next item was about the contact person change. So this is a person at the employer whom the authority can reach out to with any questions or concerns or notices, anything of that nature. We had 31 days required as of the date of the change of that person. We did receive feedback that might be too quick, that they might need to identify who the appropriate person is to speak about the private plan. While we understand that, we didn't want to extend it too far out. We were willing to go 45 days. Ideally, there would be no gap. They would always have one person at the employer who could answer our questions, receive notices, everything else required of the private plans, but we were willing to give them 45 days. And we also clarified that this is not meant to be a person who knows everything about the plan and is responsible for paying claims or anything like that. It's just one person at the company who can receive that notice or answer questions, or at least find the right person to answer the question the authority may have. So we did make a couple updates there. The third item was reference to a provision that said employers are prohibited from collecting contributions from employees in order to pay penalties related to the private plan. There's a little bit of confusion about what that meant. I think it was because we used the word contributions, which really generally we mean is that that's the amount that employees pay towards the underlying coverage. And really we meant this to apply to penalties. So we updated the language to remove the word contributions and essentially say that we're talking about penalties being the responsibility of the employer if there's any penalties related to the private plan not being administered appropriately, and employees' funds are not to be used to pay the penalty. And then last but not least, subrogation. We added language to subrogation, to our section about subrogation, limiting it in some ways. We received a question about what that meant and what the consequences were. Once again, we had a robust conversation last week at the Policy and Personnel Committee meeting. If anyone wants to watch that, they can. But ultimately, we were trying to figure out if the language was too, it was unnecessary, whether it didn't go far enough. And we decided we need to just table it for now. We need to do more research, reach out to the right people, and discuss in the future. The turnaround time from last week to this week was just too quick to want to make that hold up the other changes that have been made. I have spoken incredibly fast. That's basically it. The goal would be have the board vote to adopt the revisions, but once again, happy to take any questions that the board may have.
Thanks, Michael. Molly, you have a question?
Yeah, and I'll be quick. The change from employers have 60 days after effective date of the plan to give the plan document to employees to 90 days.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that document already exist? Like, what's the, if the document already exists, why do they need more time to distribute it?
Yeah, generally they'll have, and obviously insurance companies will be able to speak to this better than I will, but I have some background in this. Insurance companies have their sort of template document. That's their contract that has, 95% of it's the same or relatively similar to what they filed with the Department of Insurance, but then they need to sort of fill in details, the employer name, the policy number, maybe they have higher benefit amount percentages than the state minimum. So there's a little bit of work that needs to happen. And at the same time, this is likely happening along with other coverages, life insurance, short-term disability. So often they take a little bit of time to get the documents to their employers, the official contracts that are going to be used to administer their claims. So it's my understanding that it's very common to have a few months potentially where that contract is being administered, but it's not officially kind of drafted yet. What they gave us during the application process, what we ask of them is a plain language guide, which has sort of a couple pages details of the plan, and then at the minimum, a sample version of the policy. So it'll have potentially brackets of information that's not locked down yet. It may not have the employer's name on it. It may not have the policy number or who to call if you have a claim. There's a little bit of detail that's missing from that document that needs that official version to be issued to employers. Does that help at all?
A little. If the answer is the document doesn't exist yet, and that's why employers need more time, that seems like that's a problem that requires a different kind of solution than changing the timing of when employers have to distribute it.
Yeah, it definitely, I mean, it is a contract, and every single one is, a unique contract between that employer and their TPA or insurance carrier. So there is a little bit of work that needs to do, but it is, for the most part, created. It's just a matter of kind of plugging in some of those last minute details.
Thank you. And is there anyone else that has any questions? Michael, thank you for your presentation, and I'm going to ask for a motion to adopt the revisions to the private plan policy.
Motion to adopt the revisions to the private plan policy.
Thank you, Mr. Soltis. May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, got it. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, it looks like the motion carries, and we're going to move on to Maddie, who will lead us in a discussion on the draft legislative proposal. Thank you, Michael.
Great. Good morning, everyone. You can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
The right screen? Yes. Okay.
Yep.
I was having some trouble this morning. So, great. So, good morning. I'm here to provide just a quick overview of our 2024 legislative proposals. So we are preparing right now for the 2024 legislative session. It begins in February of next year and it ends in May. Our proposal for next session includes technical changes that clarify certain sections of our statute and enable us to make some process improvements to our work. So we are proposing 7 technical changes to our law the next session. First, we propose changing the date of our annual report from July 1st to September 1st. We are already required to submit a financial report on September 1st, just a few weeks after. We're also required to submit our full annual report. It just makes more sense to submit both at the same time. And the later date will give us more time at the end of our reporting period to really analyze the data and present it. Second, we propose creating an affirmative obligation and allowing the authority to impose penalties on employers who fail to register or fail to remit required reports. Third, we propose allowing the authority to charge interest if an individual does not pay a penalty or repay overpayments in a timely fashion. This ensures that individuals have an incentive to repay the money to which they might not be entitled. Fourth, we propose language to allow the authority to impose monetary penalties on attempted fraud, even if the fraud was discovered before benefits are paid. Right now, we are allowed to impose penalties if fraud was successful, but this is a way to continue to protect our program against fraud and really dissuade people from attempting it. Fifth, we propose clarifying what other state or federal benefits should not require denial of Connecticut paid leave if they're received concurrently. This includes workers' comp, medical benefits only, et cetera. This is something we've already adopted in policy and we're looking to really solidify in our statute. These last 2 proposed changes might look a little bit familiar. They were included in last session's Senate Bill 1179, which passed the Senate, but was not called for a vote in the House. We are looking to clarify the definition of municipality in Connecticut paid leave and Connecticut FMLA, essentially as any municipal organization having the authority to levy and collect taxes. This is important because right now a clear definition of municipality doesn't exist in either law, and it's led to confusion around who is and isn't covered. Lastly, we propose creating a procedure for tribes to participate in Connecticut paid leave. Right now, our statute is silent on tribes, so there's really no way for their employees to participate in our program. So we propose language from the amendment to Senate Bill 1179 that passed the Senate that would essentially enable the governor with input from the authority to enter into an MOU with tribes to authorize their employees to participate in our program. This language represents conversations with the tribes from last session and it respects tribal sovereignty, which we know is important. Yeah, and that's all I have. So I'll take any questions and ask for a vote as well.
Thank you, Maddie. Maddie, I'm just curious around the definition of municipality. That just seems so strange to me. But I'm so aware that there has been some misunderstanding around that. But can you add any detail to that for us?
Yes. So Aaron and Michael, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the authority adopted a definition of municipality by policy, but it takes different definitions in other statutes into ours, and it's just, I think, confusing for people to understand whether they count, right?
Got it.
There are over a dozen different definitions of municipality in the statutes, and so we adopted sort of the broadest one because we had no guidance otherwise, but it's a very fact specific and difficult to apply, whereas just saying, do you levy taxes?
Yeah, I got it. Okay, thank you. Thanks for the clarification. Any other questions for Maddie? Okay, thank you, Maddie. I don't see any hands up. May I have a motion to approve the revised legislation proposal?
So moved,
May I have a
Councilman.
motion? Thanks, Jim. Second?
Second, Mike.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you, Maddie. Okay, we're moving on to Jessica, quarterly outreach and engagement.
Thank you. Amber, may I have screen sharing permission, please?
You're all set.
Thank you. All right. Good morning. So I'm here to provide your quarterly update on our outreach and engagement efforts. Here's a quick snapshot of what we've been up to and what we will be up to from September through December. So I won't read through each one, but as you can see, we have been out and about quite a bit. Would like to thank everybody on my team, as well as people who are not on my team who have been jumping in to help us cover all these great events. Just one or two I'd like to highlight for you. Yesterday, Amber and Nancy attended the Access Health Community Conference in New Haven, which was a new event for us and went very well. And then also on 11/6, Nancy and I will be at Mohegan Sun for the Connecticut Nurses Association Annual Convention, which is one we're really excited about because, as you've heard me talk about, we really are focused on trying to reach those sort of facilitators or intermediaries who work with a lot of the folks that may need our program. So we're excited to be able to participate in that. You see a couple of screenshots up here of our first two library events, which took place in Middletown. And then just a couple days ago, Erin was in with Maddie in Hebron. So while we had, smaller groups, we felt that they were really worthwhile because all of the individuals who attended were really in the throes of needing to apply for our program. And so we were able to provide some really good guidance and help for them. We're learning as we go along and coming up with some different ways to extend our outreach for our future events to continue to grow this program. I'm also excited that due to some of Nancy's diligent outreach to youth and family services in various towns, we have or will be doing several trainings with some of those individuals. So we've already done one with East Windsor. We will have one with the Shoreline Collaborative, which is several of the shoreline towns, including like Guilford, Clinton, those areas, and then also Waterbury. Wanted to just provide a quick update. We are really kind of reorganizing all of the various outreach contacts we have into a regional plan. So I have a map here of Connecticut. This is the new census breakdown for the state of Connecticut, which we've decided to break up even a little bit further, specifically in that light blue area, which is the capital region. We've broken it up into Northeast, Northwest, Southeast, Southwest, and then Fairfield County, we've divided into Upper and Lower Fairfield County. The reason for these being, we really want to come up with a very defined strategy for each region of the state. And we know that, for example, and I can say this having worked in Fairfield County for a number of years, Lower and Upper Fairfield County are really just very, very different communities. And so we think we really need a very strategic way to reach out to those different parts of the state. So I have a list of the different categories that we're focused on. This is ever evolving and growing. But just to give you an idea of sort of the comprehensive nature of this plan that we are coming up with. A couple of other notable events, wanted to raise that Erin participated at the beginning of September in a panel discussion hosted by the Bipartisan Policy Center. They recently did a poll on paid family and medical leave as it relates to folks who are not currently in the workforce, either by choice or because they're unemployed, and what impact having paid family and medical leave would have on their decision to return to the workforce. So in addition to these poll results, Erin was joined by the program leaders of the paid leave programs in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Maryland, who spoke about each state's sort of unique characteristics. I did link the discussion, so when you get the slides, if you'd like to watch it, you can. And the major takeaway from this was that access to paid leave was nearly as important for respondents as flexible work schedules and compensation. So 15% said that paid family and medical leave would be the most important consideration for them returning to work, which is nearly identical to the 16% who cited compensation and the 19% who cited flexible work schedules. Another event that actually just happened yesterday, and I really want to thank Maddie as she was the driving force behind organizing this. For Hispanic Heritage Month, we did a panel discussion with some representatives from the Puerto Rican and Latino caucus. So Representatives Reyes, Santiago, and Sanchez participated, and Aaron moderated. We did this at the Legislative Office Building, and it was streamed live on CTN. We are going to have sort of a highlight reel as well as the full video, which is linked here, that we'll continue to use on social media and in our newsletters to continue to promote this. But it was a great discussion. The legislators had a lot of wonderful suggestions for us in terms of other areas and ways we can do outreach to their constituents in the Hispanic community. So it was a great first event of this kind, and we're already thinking and talking about other events with legislators that we can do in a similar fashion moving forward. We had a great piece in the Connecticut Mirror. Molly, I was thinking of you as I put this slide together, because it's always something we're talking about, is that, confusion between FMLA and paid leave. And so a reporter from the Connecticut Mirror did an explainer piece where she sat down with Aaron. She really did a lot of research as well. And this article appeared on September 11th, highlighting those differences between the two laws. And it appeared both in English and in Spanish, which was great. And I have that linked as well in case you would like to read it when you receive these slides. Also wanted to share with you that since about May, we have really been focusing on kind of streamlining our press, podcasts, and social media into sort of one overarching monthly theme. Not that that's the only thing we talk about during that month, but really just to create kind of a synergy between a lot of the different outreach that we're doing. So we focus on mental health in May, Pride Month, and issues and challenges facing the LGBTQ+ community in June, economic impacts of paid leave in July, breastfeeding in August, addiction and recovery in September, and this month our focus is domestic violence. We'll be caregivers in November and living with chronic disease in December. So I've linked the podcasts and the releases pertaining to each theme so that you can check them out if you would like. And the screenshot on the left, this is a new feature of our new website that I'm really excited about, which allows us to highlight these new press pieces and podcasts as they come out. So they're really front and center when someone visits our website, which we're excited about that opportunity to be able to get them out to a wider audience. As you know, we have created infographics for sort of a general overview of paid leave, but also for caregivers, domestic violence, etc. And I wanted to share this new one that Amber created for us, and it relates to chronic illness. We know that many people don't know or don't understand that if they have a chronic illness, paid leave can be a support for them when they need to take time intermittently, either because of a flare-up in their condition or because they need to visit their healthcare provider. And Amber partnered with the Lupus Foundation. She was at the Lupus Foundation walk just a few weeks ago. And so she created this infographic, which we will use as we continue this outreach to different organizations that support people living with chronic illnesses. Lastly, just because it's been a bit since I've provided updates on our newsletters, we sent out 4 newsletters recently. Private plans, what I consider kind of general market, so sort of everyone who's on our email list. Maddie does a monthly newsletter for legislators, and then our TPA newsletter. And across the board, very, very pleased with the open rates ranging from the low 30s to mid 40%, with anywhere from a 1.5 to almost a 4% click-through rate. So I'm very encouraged by the fact that even as we become a bit of a more mature program, we still are putting out content that folks are interested in and are, opening our emails and interacting with the content. And just like Michael, I feel like I went pretty fast, but I'm happy to answer any questions anyone might have about any of our initiatives.
Thanks so much, Jessica. And I think the social media is fabulous. I love it.
Thank you.
So thank you. Great job there. Any
Jessica,
questions or comments?
Jessica, reach out to me privately. I think there's a show coming up later this month in Connecticut for the fire and EMS community that you might want to participate in. So I'll give you the details on that.
Excellent. Thank you. And we always welcome and love your suggestions for anything happening in your communities you think we should be at. Please always let us know.
Terrific. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to the committee reports. It is 10:45. I'm going to go to policy and personnel. Mike?
Okay, very briefly, our committee met last week. We discussed the finance accounting manual revisions and the private plan policy revisions, which Michael told us about a few minutes earlier, and the board adopted a few minutes earlier. And that's the report.
Thank you, Mike. Molly, outreach and engagement?
We met. Jessica told us a lot of the great stuff that we are needed here, and we also heard from Maddie. So I think we have covered everything we need to cover from our committee.
Agreed. Holly on finance and audit.
Yes, we met last month and Dave walked us through the financial reports that he is going to present to you now.
Excellent. So we'll go right along to Dave. Thank you.
All right.
Dave.
Hello, everybody. Oh, thank you, Fran. Hello, everybody. Good morning. In the interest of time, I'm going to be mercifully brief this morning. In terms of the operating budget and the bond budget, we are ahead of budget year to date for those. There was nothing unusual that happened there. In terms of the contribution budget, which I'm going to share on screen with you now, we are also. Can you all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry, my screen froze for a
Oh,
second.
there you go.
Okay, all right. All right, guess I wasn't going to be as brief as I thought I was. Okay, so year to date, we are ahead of budget for contributions as well by $11 million. For the month of August, we were behind budget by $3.4 million, but that is attributed to the lumpiness that Erin described earlier. We paid 5 weeks of benefits during the month of August, and for budget purposes, our benefit payments are more streamlined during the year. But having said that, we are $11 million ahead of budget. And in terms of, oh, sorry, hold on. I am having technical difficulties, of course. Okay, I can't, for some reason, I can't show that on screen for some reason. But, oh, no, there we go. Okay, we are at $549 million in the fund as of the month of August. So in conclusion, we are ahead of budget and we are solvent. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you. And thanks for the brevity, Dave. No questions for Dave? Okay, we're going to move right along. Erin, do you have a CEO report to share with us?
I think we're good.
I think
You've
we're
seen
good
everything
too.
we've done. And again, I just want to appreciate the robust discussion this morning. I think it's important that the public knows that we take our responsibility seriously. And I think it's important for the decision-making process to be transparent. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you. And thanks to the team for, diligence in preparing the report. John, again, thank you for your passion and, research and really being the catalyst behind a very robust discussion. Thank you. And thanks everyone
Thank you.
for your participation. Do we have any old business? Any new business? Okay, so everybody's gonna get 10 minutes back in their day. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. A second.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion carries. Thank you so much. The time is 10:49. Have a wonderful day, everybody. And thank you so much for your commitment to this program and for your collective passion and feedback to make this a success. And to echo what Erin said, transparency is so important. And I'm proud to be here with all of you and share all of this information with the public. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.